in the early days, there's a lot of stories, positive stories about the high rises, and there's a lot of the good old day type conversation where they talk about some of the stories from the early years. And then it seems that from what I read, some of the screening changed and based on income standards and all that stuff. How did that affect? Give us a little explanation of what I'm trying to say here, and kind of elaborate a little more on that.
Yeah, great. So two things are going on. One, in the late 60s, there's an effort to really address poverty. And so some simplistic policymakers in Washington said, well, we've got this asset called public housing. It's low-income housing. We've got to make sure that the poor, that it really helps those most in need. So the poorest of the poor ought to have priority. So in 68, there's certain, changes to rental law, 69, called the Brooke Amendment, 1969, that changes the rent structure, that's going to push out, it's going to set rent, it's going to require all rent be a percentage of your income. So if you made in 1969 $100 a month, which was not, just low income, let's say you made $100 a month. A more typical number might be more like $500 a month. Let me be more realistic. Then you'd pay a third of your income for rent. Okay, so your rent's going to go up with your income with raises. And in the 60s and 70s, the early 70s, we had big inflation. So wages were going up and rents were going up. So how long are you going to do that before you're like, I'm out of here. I don't want my rent going up every time I get a raise. And that drives out working class. And who's going to come in? Those most in need, those without incomes, those desperately poor, and they're going to stay longer because, long-term poverty it means they're going to be in the building. If they're going to have a 20-year stay and the working class family is going to have a 4-year stay, by the time you cycle through that, eventually everybody's very poor. So that's point one. So
real quick before you go on to the second point, Brad. So question there, like if you had a mulligan and you were starting this over, and you're going to have 150 units or whatever it is the right makeup to have some proportion of, I'll call it middle class, working class, and those most in need, instead of doing the most in need first and being almost fully subsidized? Is that what makes it a more communal or make it a more chance to succeed, I guess, because then you have more income coming in for the maintenance, for the property, et cetera. Yeah.
So a lot depends on the subsidies and the economics of it. So these mixed income communities that we're building now, where it's roughly a third, although those numbers aren't always playing out, where a third of the residents are low income, below 80% of market, often below 50% of fair market rent in terms of their income. I'm not using those terms exactly precisely. And then a third kind of in a middle working class mode and a third market rate. The idea is that, okay, there'll be enough residents who have enough at stake to small p police the community. Now, that's a very complicated story. I'm not sure that's the best model at all. It's one we're trying. It's working a little better than the old one. The idea that there are buildings in Chicago that are perfectly well run, that you drive by all the time, that are high rise, all low income, but there's a bigger range of low income, and they have stronger property management, and they have stronger subsidies to make sure that the building has the money to fix things when they go wrong. So there are ways to do low-income housing. These are, privately owned, privately managed, federally subsidized, where nearly 100% of the residents are subsidized, but the range of low income goes from, deeply poor on welfare, barely making it, to, 80% of fair market, of median family income, where there's a working class element where people are working, and it's fine. 2200 South Michigan is a building that I did some interviews in with the manager and residents, and you'd walk in and be like, yeah, nice building. Not a luxury building, but perfectly nice building.
Got it. So
sorry, I'm getting on too long.
No, it's all good. It's all good stuff. So we were talking about just the change there from The lower income limits and squeezing out. So we had one. What was the second point?
So yeah, point one was the rental structure. Point two is that working class families didn't want to move into these chaotic environments if they could avoid it. So you can't attract people. And so by the mid 70s, the housing authority has a hard time filling the upper floors of their buildings because people know like these elevators are going to go down. Who wants to walk up with their groceries after work, right? So, and you're walking up those stairwells, and those stairwells are vulnerable spaces to get robbed, to get, all sorts of bad things are happening. So, working class African Americans will not move in. And so who will move in? Only the desperately poor. And so the housing authority will move families in and so the whole building becomes some of the poorest communities in the country by the 80s in a way that's, not a healthy way to create a community.